Close your eyes. That's off limits, the rancher checks. And then he had a wife. The rancher had lived alone long enough to trust silence more than people. So when he heard a strained breath cutting through the open plain, he stopped as if the land itself had spoken. The sound came from the lone cottonwood near the dry wash, a place even cattle avoided. And as he stepped closer, he saw her, suspended in a way that made his stomach knot, a rope biting into the branch above, her body stretched in a cruel balance that looked more like punishment than accident. Instinct told him to look away, to give privacy to suffering. Yet another voice, older, steadier, held him still. Close your eyes. That's off limits, he muttered to himself. More command than promise. As he checked the rope's tension and the knot's integrity, without letting his gaze wander where it shouldn't. She was conscious. That much he knew by the tremor in her arms and the grit in her teeth. And when their eyes met by accident, there was no shame in hers, only fury at the world that had left her like this. He asked her name. She didn't answer. He asked who did this. She laughed once, sharp and dry, and said nothing. The rancher's hands moved carefully, loosening the knot enough to take weight without dropping her. The kind of measured calm learned from years of breaking horses and burying friends. When he finally lowered her to the ground, she didn't collapse. She stood, wobbly, proud, and faced him like a storm refusing to pass. She told him to turn around while she fixed her dress, and he did, staring at the horizon as if it held instructions. He offered water without looking. She took it without thanks. The horse snorted behind them, restless, and she flinched at the sound, eyes tracking exits like a hunted thing. He noticed the scars then, not by staring, but by recognizing patterns. Old injuries healed wrong, a life that had learned endurance before mercy. She said her people were gone. Whether by distance or death, she wouldn't say. And when he offered to take her to town, she shook her head as if towns were traps with clean names. He told her about his ranch, the creek that still ran when others dried up, the small cabin with one bed and a table made for two he never used. She studied him the way one studies a blade, testing weight, balance, truth. Night came on with a wind that carried dust and memory, and she agreed to ride only after he promised to walk ahead and keep his eyes forward. Along the way, she spoke in fragments. Not stories, warnings, rules, lines she would not cross. That's off limits, she said once when his question strayed. And he nodded, accepting the border without complaint. At the cabin, he lit a lamp and slept on the floor. Boots on, door open. She took the bed and a knife from his shelf without asking. In the quiet hours, he listened to her breathing even, then hitch, then settle. And he realized the land had changed its mind about him. By morning, she was at the table, mending her dress with steady hands, eyes lifted just long enough to say she would stay one day, no more, because debts were dangerous things. He poured coffee, set it down, and didn't argue. He had checked what was off limits and learned where not to look. What he hadn't checked yet was what the land intended when it brought her to his tree. She stayed longer than one day, not because he asked, but because the land seemed to claim her the way it claims those who have nowhere else to stand. At first they spoke little, sharing space the way two wary animals do, parallel, alert, respectful of distance. She learned the rhythms of the ranch quickly, how the fences needed patience more than strength, how the horse responded better to a quiet hand than a hard pull. He learned her silences, how certain questions tightened her jaw, how others loosened it just enough for truth to slip through. Nights passed with the lamp low, and the knife always within her reach. And mornings came with work that didn't care who you had been before. One evening, as he checked a fence line, riders appeared on the horizon, their pace wrong, their purpose sharp. She saw them too and went still, a look crossing her face that told him this was the past refusing to stay buried. She said they would ask questions dressed as kindness, and offer protection that tasted like ownership. He told her to go inside, to take the horse and ride if she had to. But she shook her head. I won't hang again, she said, not as fear but as a vow. When the men arrived, they spoke of law and order, of women needing guardians, of arrangements that solved problems. The rancher listened, eyes level, hands open, until one of them stepped too close to her space, crossing a line he had learned to recognize. That's off limits, he said quietly. And the words carried weight because he meant them. The confrontation was brief and ugly, ending with dust and threats and the promise of return, but when the riders left, something settled. Between the rancher and the woman, an understanding, forged not in rescue but in choice. She didn't thank him. She cooked. Later, she told him her name. The real one. and how her people believed bonds were proven by endurance, not ceremony. He told her about the wife he lost years ago, how grief can make a man mistake loneliness for peace. They didn't touch then. They didn't need to. Days later, trouble returned as expected, louder this time, and she didn't hide. She stood beside him, back straight, eyes unflinching. And when it was over, the ranch stood quiet again, earned by resolve rather than mercy. In the weeks that followed, the cabin changed without either of them naming it. 2 cups left out. A repaired roof, laughter once, surprised by itself. When winter threatened early, she stitched heavier clothes from old hides, and he built another chair. One night, as wind pressed against the walls, she asked what he would do when she left. He answered honestly, he would keep the ranch and the rules he'd learned. She nodded and said she would stay. Not because she owed him, but because she chose the life they were already living. The wedding, if it could be called that, was a morning decision made over coffee, witnessed by the horse and the land. No vows spoken aloud, only a shared understanding that some things are off limits. Fear, ownership, the past, and some things are earned by standing your ground together. When people later said the rancher checked and then had a wife, they missed the truth. He learned where not to look, where to stand, and how to let a woman choose him back.